Right, where to start when you first start to consider doing an oil painting? I suppose the first thing you have to consider is the idea. Well, my idea is to do a picture of HMS Victory. It was off the Channel Islands, just off of Alderney, in what they call the Casquettes, which is like a group of rocks that were notorious for being problems to ships in them times. So that is my starting point. I've done a little bit of research and found the basic shapes of the rocks, so I'm going to incorporate some of that into the picture. But I've also got a few pictures off the internet as reference for HMS Victory. So it just gives an idea of how the sails can be and the basics of the ship. I'll probably be getting one or two more things. I've got a little bit about the rig in there, and then I've also got wave formations, waves over rocks and that sort of thing. Another thing that you can find when looking on the internet. So that's some more information for me. As you can see, I've already been doing a little bit of sketching. There's nothing worse than a blank canvas. This particular canvas is already primed, so I don't have to worry too much about the priming. But normally a lot of canvases you just prime it with white emulsion paint, and that seems to be sufficient. I love to work in oils because it gives you more flexibility. You can thin them down and overlap them, and also have one paint showing inside another or behind another, which makes some interesting effects. So I enjoy oil paints as a medium. Brushes, oil paints and everything I tend to buy on eBay, purely because my finances are not that great, and you can get some real bargains, especially if you go in the online auction. The all-important first brush stroke. Right, you mustn't be too frightened of it at this stage. You can see I'm just using a very simple little palette, mixing up the colours on the palette. I've put linseed oil with it just to make it easier to use, and I start normally from the top of the picture and work my way down, quite roughly to begin with, and then add the detail afterwards. So I start with the top of the sky. As you can see there, I've created quite a nice start to the sky effect with just using 3 colours. It doesn't have to be particularly exact at this point, but it's just to give a feeling of light and of natural cloud formations in the background. Well, you can see now I've put an horizon in there, so what separates the sky from the sea in this case, which you can see down there. I've got a nice bluey green background, much darker, and straight away it starts to look like sky and sea, and already quite dramatic. At this point it's probably best to leave it for a while, possibly 2 days, and just allow the paint to congeal a bit, and it makes it easier to carry on with the working. You can put a few highlights on the water at this stage if you wish, but as I'm going to be drawing and painting over with for the actual ship, it'll probably be easier if I leave it to dry a bit at this stage. It can actually. This is a couple of days later. It's dried a little bit. I've just marked roughly where I want the sails, the main sail mast to fall. But just as an aid, I'm going to use an old golf club, as that's pretty good as a straight line, just to aid my shaky hands. If I rest that along there, a little bit of a cheat, I know, but hey ho. It's much easier to get it right first time, and then of course it stops a lot of hassle later on. That gives me roughly where I want the mast to go. I'll have to leave it a little bit longer for the paint underneath to dry before I can actually start painting. Just to speed things up slightly, as the background paint is still wet, so it hasn't dried out quite as quickly as I thought it would, I'm going to use some toilet tissue and just take some of the background colour off, so that will speed it up and make the top painting slightly quicker. You now see, as if by magic, the basic structure of the sails starts to shine through. So it'll take far less, a shorter time now for that paint to dry on the areas of the sails, so it'll make it far easier for the overpainting. Now you can see I'm just starting to paint in the sails and the rigging. So it's just beginning to look, see I'm starting at the top again, same as I did with the sky. Start up the top and work your way down, then you're not working over your own work and smudging it as you go, so it makes life a little bit easier. And now you can see I'm getting a little bit of detail into the sails and the rigging, so it's beginning to take shape. I've just put a few highlights on the sea now, so you can begins to have more of an impression of the sea. At this point, I'll just point out that this is not the HMS Victory that we normally associate, the one in Plymouth. That's all restored and lovely. This is the original one that was lost 4th of October 1744 off the Channel Islands. So colour scheme slightly different. Front structure reasonably similar, but the actual boat or ship sat much higher in the water line, because it was more top heavy, so it was very difficult to steer, which is probably why it was lost in the first place, because it was very difficult to steer. So probably when they were approaching the rocks, especially as it was very windy and quite stormy on that occasion, it was probably very difficult to steer it away from the rocks, which is probably why it was lost. But you can see the actual structure of the few bits of information we have about it. This is just a model ship, but there's a line drawing that shows it slightly more detail, probably a little bit more authentic, but colour scheme being the main thing. So the deck and the structure of the boat is the superstructure actually of the ship. I've decided that this is the finish of the picture. Got some of the waves and the rocks showing, and I think it encapsulates a disaster moment when the ship was lost. This will be on sale on eBay.